The ancient map was nothing like Sarah Sinclair had ever seen before. Torn at the edges, its ink faded and smudged with the years, it seemed more like a relic from a forgotten world than a key to a mystery that had evaded explorers for centuries. But there, in the corner of the map, was a symbol, a series of cryptic markings, and a small red circle, the only thing clearly visible, the lost city of Partida. She'd laughed at first, dismissing the warning as the ravings of a man who'd lost his sanity. But now, as she held the map, Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine.
The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense expanse of the Amazon rainforest. The air was thick with the humid warmth of late afternoon, and the sound of distant wildlife echoed through the thick canopy. In the heart of a bustling city, Sarah Sinclair, an archaeologist, gazed at the map spread before her. Her fingers traced the lines marking a forgotten place, a lost city buried somewhere deep within the jungle, untouched by modern civilization for centuries. It had been little more than a legend, until now. For years, Sarah had studied ancient civilizations, specializing in South American cultures. The lost city of Paititi, said to be filled with treasures and secrets, had intrigued her for as long as she could remember. Many had searched for it, but none had returned. There were whispers of it, legends passed down through indigenous tribes, tales of gods and curses. But to Sarah, it was more than just a myth. It was the key to uncovering a lost chapter in history. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" James Hartley, her trusted colleague, asked. He was seated across from her in the small office, looking skeptical as he adjusted his glasses. James was a tech expert, his mind wired for machines and algorithms, not ancient legends. But Sarah had convinced him to join her on this expedition. Despite his reservations, there was no turning back now. She looked up at him, her green eyes filled with unwavering determination. "I'm sure. The coordinates are real. And this time, we'll find it." She had gathered a team: James, an experienced guide named Carlos, an archaeologist named Ava, and a quiet photographer named Ethan. Together, they would venture into the heart of the jungle, past the uncharted territories and into the very core of a mystery that had evaded explorers for centuries. The expedition began early the next morning. The air was thick and sticky, the humidity making it feel as though the jungle itself was pressing in on them. The team had packed light, knowing that their journey would require mobility. The dense forest was a living, breathing entity, filled with the cries of unseen animals and the rustling of unseen creatures. The sound of their footsteps seemed almost muffled by the constant hum of life that surrounded them. Sarah led the way, machete in hand, hacking through the thick foliage. James followed closely behind, constantly checking the GPS device to ensure they were on the right track. Carlos, their guide, walked at the back, his sharp eyes scanning the jungle for any signs of danger. Ava, younger than the others but filled with uncontainable excitement, was constantly jotting down notes, marveling at the flora and fauna they passed. Ethan, ever the observer, trailed behind with his camera, capturing the essence of their journey. As the day wore on, the jungle seemed to grow thicker, darker, and more oppressive. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy above, leaving everything in a perpetual twilight. The air was heavy with moisture, and the team's clothes quickly became soaked with sweat. Every step they took was a battle against nature. Thick vines tangled around their legs, and the dense underbrush slowed their progress. But they pressed on, driven by the lure of discovery. "How much further?" James asked, his voice tinged with impatience. Carlos, who had been leading the way for years, glanced at the sky. "A few more hours. The city's hidden deep in the jungle. We'll need to camp tonight and continue at first light." The team nodded, knowing the terrain was becoming increasingly treacherous. As night began to fall, they set up camp in a small clearing, building a fire and settling in for the night. The jungle sounds grew louder as the darkness crept in, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The next day, the team awoke early, the fire still smoldering as the first rays of dawn pierced the jungle's dense canopy. They packed up quickly, eager to continue their journey. Carlos led the way, cutting through the underbrush with his machete as the team followed closely behind. Hours later, they stumbled upon something unexpected: stone ruins. The moss-covered remnants of an ancient structure rose from the earth, half buried by centuries of vegetation. The jungle had claimed the city, but parts of it still remained, stubbornly holding on to the past. The discovery was met with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Ava, unable to contain herself, knelt down to examine the carvings on the stone, while Ethan captured every detail with his camera. Sarah stepped forward, feeling a rush of emotion as she ran her fingers across the ancient stones. These ruins were proof that the lost city of Paititi existed. It was real. "Carlos, do you know what this is?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carlos examined the ruins closely. "This is just the beginning. The city is deeper in, past the jungle's reach. But this is a sign that we're on the right path." The team pressed on, passing through the ruins and following a narrow stone path that led deeper into the jungle. The jungle grew darker, the air thicker, and the atmosphere more oppressive as they ventured forward. They knew they were getting closer. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the city, the team encountered more ruins, massive stone statues, weathered by time, depicting ancient gods and warriors. The city was vast, more magnificent than Sarah had ever imagined. But there was something off about it. The air felt heavy, and there was an eerie silence that seemed to settle over them. "It's too quiet," Ethan said, his voice low, as he snapped pictures of the statues. "Where is everyone?" Carlos looked uneasy. "This city, it's not just a ruin. There's a reason no one's found it before. The legends of Paititi speak of a curse: those who enter are never seen again." Sarah frowned, her thoughts racing. "We're not turning back now. We've come too far." As they explored deeper into the city, they uncovered a hidden temple at the heart of the ruins. The stone doors were cracked, and vines had grown over them, but the markings on the door were unmistakable. This was the heart of the city. Sarah reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the door. The moment her fingers made contact, a deep rumbling shook the ground. The temple door slowly creaked open, revealing the dark, hollow interior. But as they stepped inside, they were not alone. The moment they entered the temple, the air grew colder, and a strange humming sound filled the chamber. The walls were covered in ancient glyphs, and in the center of the room, an altar stood, covered in dust and cobwebs. The altar was surrounded by strange artifacts, golden masks, ceremonial knives, and intricately carved stones. Ava stepped forward, her excitement palpable. "This is it. The treasure, the key to unlocking the history of Paititi." But as she reached out to touch one of the artifacts, the ground beneath them shook violently. A large stone door in the back of the chamber slammed shut, trapping them inside. From the darkness, ancient guardians began to emerge, massive stone statues, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The air thickened, and the temperature dropped. It was clear that the legends were true: the city was cursed, and the guardians of Paititi were not simply statues. They were protectors, and they would not allow anyone to leave with the city's secrets. Panic set in as the team scrambled for an escape. The stone guardians began to move, their massive forms coming to life with terrifying speed. Carlos shouted for them to move, and Sarah led the way, trying to keep the team together. James, his face pale with fear, clutched his GPS device, but the signal was dead. "We're trapped. There's no way out." Ethan, camera in hand, snapped frantic photos, his eyes wide with fear. "This is insane. What are we supposed to do?" Carlos, the experienced guide, was the first to act. He grabbed a spear-like artifact from the altar and threw it at one of the stone guardians. The weapon hit the guardian's chest with a deafening clang, but it did nothing to stop it. "Run!" Carlos yelled. The team dashed toward the back of the chamber, trying to find a way out. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the stone guardians followed, their footsteps booming like thunder. They reached the door that had slammed shut earlier, but it wouldn't budge. As the guardians closed in, Sarah's heart raced. They had come so far, but it looked like the lost city would claim them just as it had claimed so many others. In the midst of the chaos, Ava noticed something, an inscription above the door that glowed faintly. She scrambled toward it, wiping away the dust and debris. It was a riddle, an ancient puzzle that held the key to escaping the city. Working quickly, Ava deciphered the riddle, and as the last word was spoken, the stone door creaked open. The team bolted through the opening just as the stone guardians reached them, the door slamming shut behind them. But they weren't safe yet. The jungle outside had turned hostile, as though the city's curse had spread. Animals lurked in the shadows, and the jungle itself seemed to be closing in on them. They had to move quickly if they wanted to survive. With one final push, they made it out of the city's grip, emerging into the thick, oppressive jungle once more. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. As they caught their breath, Sarah looked back at the ruins. They had uncovered the lost city of Paititi, but at what cost? The jungle was vast and wild, and the secrets it held were far from over. Exhausted, the team made their way back to civilization. But the journey had changed them. They had uncovered the secrets of the lost city, but some secrets were better left buried. The jungle held many mysteries, and not all of them could be understood. As they boarded the plane back home, Sarah looked out the window, the jungle fading into the distance. The world had changed, but the jungle would always hold its secrets. The end.